Imagine it's Thanksgiving. The table is laden with food, your loved ones gathered, sharing stories and laughter. We call it sharing, an act synonymous with kindness, generosity, and love. It's a fundamental part of what makes us human, right? A warm, fuzzy feeling. But what if I told you that for our ancient ancestors, sharing food had almost nothing to do with kindness? What if the very act of parting with your hard-won meal, every precious calorie, was driven by something far more brutal, far more calculating, and ultimately, far more essential for survival? Prepare to uncover the surprising, often cutthroat, truth behind how ancient humans truly shared food. It will fundamentally change how you see yourself and our species forever. We begin by dismantling a deeply ingrained modern myth, a comforting bedtime story we've told ourselves about our primordial past, the idea of the noble savage, living in idyllic harmony, freely and benevolently sharing their hard-won bounty with everyone in the tribe. It's a beautiful image, isn't it? One of communal bliss, where generosity flowed as freely as the rivers, and altruism was the currency of survival. But peel back that romanticized veneer, and you're confronted with a truth far grittier, far more desperate, and frankly, far more logical for the world our ancestors inhabited. For ancient humans, food wasn't merely an inconvenience you forgot to pack for lunch, or a momentary craving satisfied by a quick trip to the grocery store. It was life or death, period, often. The difference between living another day and succumbing to the harsh realities of the Stone Age was a mere whisper, a single missed meal away from starvation. We, in our modern world of overflowing refrigerators and drive-through convenience, can scarcely fathom the profound, all-encompassing desperation that defined existence before agriculture. Before settled farms and reliable surpluses, every single calorie was a precious commodity, fought for, risked for, and earned at immense energetic cost. Think about it. Every berry gathered from a thorny bush, every root dug from hardened soil, every wild game animal tracked, hunted, and brought down, each required staggering amounts of physical labor, keen observational skills, and often facing down mortal danger. You weren't just picking up a ready-made meal, you were earning it, calorie by painstaking calorie, against a backdrop of constant threat from predators and rivals. This was a world without safety nets, without food banks, without guaranteed next meals. Hunger wasn't a temporary discomfort, it was a constant, gnawing companion, a pervasive threat that shaped every decision, every interaction. Now, against this backdrop of brutal scarcity and relentless struggle, let's re-examine that simple, warm concept of kindness. The idea of pure, unconditional sharing, what we might call true altruism, would have been not just a luxury, but an evolutionary dead end. Imagine an early human, after days of exhausting tracking and a perilous hunt, finally bringing down a sizable animal. Every ounce of that meat represents an enormous energy investment. The calories burned during the hunt, the risks taken, the hours spent, the effort of processing it. To simply give away a significant portion of that kill without any expectation of a concrete return would be to literally give away a part of their own survival capacity. Their bodies were finely tuned survival machines, operating on incredibly tight energetic budgets. Any deviation of resources, any significant expenditure of precious calories without a very clear, tangible return, would directly threaten their own ability to hunt again, to reproduce, to ward off illness, or simply to stay warm through a freezing night. Early humans were not operating from a place of abundance. They were perpetually teetering on the edge of deficit. Giving away food for nothing more than a warm, fuzzy feeling would have been akin to handing over your last bullet in a firefight for a nice thought. It's a beautiful sentiment in our time, but in the Stone Age, it was a recipe for extinction. This wasn't about goodwill, it was about survival of the fittest, not just as individuals, but as a group. A group where truly selfless individuals, those who consistently gave without receiving, would quickly deplete their own resources and perish, taking their altruistic genes with them. Natural selection, in its brutal efficiency, would have weeded out pure, unreciprocated kindness because it simply wasn't sustainable. So, if pure altruism was a fatal flaw, a biological impossibility in the harsh crucible of the Stone Age, what truly motivated our ancestors? What compelled them to part with their incredibly precious, life-sustaining resources, when every bite literally meant the difference between life and death. Now, let's talk about the real game changer in human social dynamics, something scientists call reciprocal altruism. Forget any warm, fuzzy feelings you might associate with sharing. This wasn't about kindness, empathy, or the joy of giving. No, reciprocal altruism, in its ancient origins, was a cold, hard, calculated risk management strategy. It was a purely pragmatic approach to survival, born out of the brutal realities of a world where food was abundant one day and terrifyingly scarce the next. Imagine, for a moment, the daily struggle of our ancestors. They lived in environments where the success of a hunt was never guaranteed. One day, a hunter might bring down a massive beast, far more meat than their immediate family could possibly consume before it spoiled in the sun. The next day, that same hunter might come back empty-handed, their family facing starvation. This extreme unpredictability, this feast or famine cycle, was the crucible in which reciprocal altruism was forged into an incredibly powerful survival tool. Here's how it worked. Picture that successful hunter with their surplus of meat. What happens if they share it with others in their group who, today, had no luck? The expectation isn't a thank you in the modern sense, or even a deep emotional gratitude. It's a far more fundamental, unspoken agreement: I owe you. This wasn't charity. It was an investment. It was a deposit into a kind of primeval social bank account, with the clear understanding that when their luck ran out, those they had helped would be obligated to reciprocate. It was the original you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. A system designed not for feel-good moments, but for future security. This ingenious system didn't just appear overnight. It evolved because it conferred a significant evolutionary advantage. Groups that practiced reciprocal altruism were simply more likely to survive and thrive. But for such a complex social contract to flourish without formal laws or written agreements, several crucial conditions had to be met, and these conditions tell us a great deal about the cognitive and social capacities of early humans. First, there had to be repeated interactions within a stable group. You wouldn't share your hard-won meal with a stranger you'd never see again. There would be no incentive for them to pay you back. But within a consistent social circle, a small band of related individuals or closely knit allies who lived, hunted, and traveled together day in and day out, the long-term benefits of sharing far outweighed the short-term cost. Everyone knew everyone, and everyone had a shared future. Second, and perhaps most fascinating, was the capacity to remember who shared and who didn't. This was the original scorekeeping, a sophisticated mental ledger kept not on paper, but in the intricate neural networks of the human brain. Our ancestors weren't just remembering faces, they were remembering reputations. Who was reliable? Who was generous when they had plenty? And critically, who was a freeloader, a taker who rarely gave back? This wasn't some abstract moral judgment, it was vital intelligence. Remembering past favors and transgressions was literally a matter of life and death, determining who you could trust when your own stomach growled with hunger. Gossip and social monitoring played a huge role here, spreading information about individual reliability and building collective reputations long before the invention of social media. And third, for this system to remain viable, there had to be the ability to punish cheaters. If someone consistently took without giving back, the entire system would collapse. What form did this punishment take? It wasn't necessarily physical violence, though that was always a possibility. More often, it was social. A known cheater might be denied future access to shared resources. They might be socially ostracized, excluded from hunts, or even banished from the group, a veritable death sentence in the harsh prehistoric world. The fear of this social isolation, of being cut off from the very network that ensured survival, was a powerful motivator for upholding one's end of the unspoken bargain. This remarkably sophisticated system of reciprocal altruism dramatically reduced individual starvation risk. No longer was a failed hunt an automatic death sentence for a family. Instead, individual hunting failures were transformed into collective resilience. The group, as a whole, could absorb the shocks of scarcity, buffering its members against the unpredictable whims of nature. It cemented the idea that an individual's survival was deeply intertwined with the well-being of the group, not out of altruistic love, but out of pragmatic self-interest. But this raises some profound questions, doesn't it? How did our ancestors, without written language, without calendars or complex numerical systems, keep such meticulous track of these intricate social contracts, these shifting debts and credits over months or even years? And what happened when someone genuinely couldn't pay back their debt, perhaps due to illness, injury, or simply repeated bad luck? Did the system make allowances, or was it a purely merciless calculation? But beyond the calculated exchanges of reciprocal altruism, where I scratch your back, you scratch mine, another profound, even more ancient force drove food sharing among our ancestors: kin selection. This concept explains why the saying blood is thicker than water isn't just a quaint proverb, but a deeply embedded biological strategy that has shaped life on Earth for millions of years. Think about it. From a purely genetic perspective, what's the ultimate goal? It's not just about your survival and reproduction, it's about the propagation of your genes. And where do many of your genes reside? Not just in you, but in your relatives. This is the cornerstone of what biologists call inclusive fitness. It's the idea that an individual's evolutionary success isn't measured solely by their own direct offspring, but also by the reproductive success of their relatives, who share many of the same genes. If your sibling thrives and reproduces, a significant portion of your genetic legacy gets passed on, even if you yourself never have children. It's a subtle but powerful shift in perspective, moving from individual survival to gene survival. To understand how this played out in the harsh realities of the prehistoric world, we can look to a simplified version of what's known as Hamilton's rule. Don't worry, we're not diving into complex equations, just the elegant logic behind it. Hamilton's rule, at its heart, suggests that an altruistic act, an act that benefits another at a cost to yourself, is genetically favored if the benefit to the recipient, multiplied by how closely related you are to them, outweighs the cost to you. Let's break that down. Relatedness is key here. You share roughly 50% of your genes with your full siblings and your children. With nieces, nephews, and grandchildren, it's about 25%. First cousins? Around 12.5%. So, the closer the relative, the higher the genetic payoff for helping them. The benefit could be the difference between life and death for your relative. Perhaps they get to eat, survive a harsh winter, or escape a predator. The cost to you might be going hungry for a day, expending energy, or taking a slight risk. Imagine a hunter-gatherer returning to camp with a prized piece of mammoth meat. Their family unit is gathered around. Sharing that prime cut with their offspring wasn't merely nice, it was a direct and highly effective investment in their own genetic future. The child, being 50% related, carries a significant portion of the parent's genes. By ensuring that child's survival and growth, the parent directly boosted the chances of their shared genes continuing into the next generation. The same logic applied to sharing with siblings or even cousins, albeit with diminishing returns based on the degree of relatedness. This wasn't about getting something back directly from that individual in the short term, like reciprocal altruism. You weren't expecting your infant to suddenly bring you a kill next week. Instead, it was about ensuring the survival and propagation of genes identical to your own, genes housed within the bodies of your closest relatives. It's a long-term genetic strategy, played out across generations. So, while reciprocal altruism allowed unrelated individuals to form alliances based on mutual benefit, kin selection laid the undeniable groundwork for the most fundamental human social unit, the family. It explains the inherent, often overwhelming, drive to protect and provide for our close relatives. This primal wiring ensured that the individuals most likely to carry your unique genetic blueprint were prioritized, even at personal cost. The deep emotional bonds we feel for our family members, while complex, they are undoubtedly rooted in and amplified by this ancient genetic imperative. It's an elegant, if somewhat stark, reminder that much of what appears as selfless devotion has a profound evolutionary basis. But what if you were an outlier? What if you were a lone individual, perhaps an outcast, or part of a small group without immediate kin in sight? Did they simply starve, left to fend entirely for themselves in a world governed by genetic self-interest and calculated reciprocation? Or were there other, even more surprising, strategies at play, allowing even those without close relatives to find a place at the ancient dinner table? So far, we've peeled back the layers on ancient food sharing, digging past the simple everyone helps each other out narrative. We've seen it wasn't just about ensuring individual survival or even about a purely genetic imperative to keep your bloodline going. But here's where things get really fascinating, and perhaps a little cutthroat. Because ancient humans, much like us, were masters of communication long before written language. And one of their most potent forms of communication wasn't with words at all. It was with food. Imagine it. You're a successful hunter, a formidable figure in your prehistoric community. You've just brought down a massive woolly mammoth, or perhaps a dozen deer, a kill so monumental it could feed your entire band for weeks, maybe even a month. Do you quietly carve it up and distribute it evenly, like a grocery store clerk handing out rations? Absolutely not. That mammoth wasn't just meat. It was a billboard. Every cut, every portion handed out, every belly filled, was a direct, undeniable statement about you. It declared your unparalleled skill, your brute strength, your sheer tenacity in the face of danger. It showed you could provide, not just for yourself, but for your entire community. This wasn't some quiet act of humble generosity. It was a primal, booming advertisement of your status, your power, and yes, your reproductive fitness. Anthropologists call this costly signaling theory. Think about it. It's costly in terms of the immense energy, the incredible risk, and the sheer effort involved in hunting and bringing back a huge animal without modern tools. But that very cost is what makes the signal so powerful and so honest. You can't fake it. A scrawny, incompetent hunter can't consistently bring home the bacon, or the mammoth in this case. So, when a successful hunter distributed that massive kill, they weren't just nourishing bodies. They were loudly proclaiming their prowess to everyone within earshot and beyond. They were attracting potential mates, signaling their viability as a strong partner and a reliable provider, capable of supporting a family. They were cementing their leadership within the group, solidifying their position at the top of the social hierarchy. Consider the profound impact of consistently being the one who brings in the biggest hauls. It doesn't just happen once. Week after week, month after month, you're the one ensuring survival, filling bellies, making life possible for everyone. What does that signal? It broadcasts unwavering strength, undeniable reliability, and immense, irreplaceable value to the collective. You become indispensable. You become revered. This wasn't an act of naive, selfless giving. It was a calculated, strategic investment in social capital. Every calorie shared was a deposit in an ancient bank account of influence, respect, and indebtedness. You were building a network of obligation and loyalty that would pay dividends down the line. The advantages of this strategy were profound and multifaceted. In the realm of mate selection, imagine two prospective partners. One occasionally chips in with a small catch. The other consistently provides enough to feed families for days, radiating competence and security. Who do you think would have better luck attracting a partner and ensuring their genetic legacy? Beyond romance, this form of sharing fostered powerful alliances. By sharing generously, you created bonds, essentially saying, I'm powerful, I'm capable, and I'm willing to share that capability with you. These were the very foundations of ancient political power. Those who consistently provided had a louder voice around the campfire. Their opinions carried more weight. They were the natural leaders, the decision makers, because they had demonstrated their competence and their unwavering commitment to the group's welfare through the most tangible means possible: food. In essence, the power lunch isn't some modern corporate invention. It's been a cornerstone of human social dynamics since the dawn of our species. The stakes were just a bit higher, measured in survival rather than stock options. But like any powerful strategy, this strategic generosity had a razor-sharp flip side. What happened when a leader, accustomed to their position of influence, failed to provide? What if the mammoth hunt came up empty? Time and again. The trust would erode, the respect would wane, and their grip on power would loosen, perhaps violently. And what about the individual who tried to assert influence, to stake a claim to leadership, without the means to back it up? A boastful hunter who consistently returned with empty hands would quickly become an object of derision, their social standing plummeting, their claims seen as hollow and laughable. The social consequences of these displays, or the devastating lack thereof, were immediate and often brutal. Success meant elevation, respect, and greater reproductive opportunities. Failure meant ostracization, diminished influence, and potentially even exclusion from vital resources. So, did this system always lead to cohesion, to a smoothly functioning group? Not necessarily. While it forged strong bonds between the successful and the beneficiaries, it also created fertile ground for jealousy, rivalry, and resentment. The very act of claiming status could be a flashpoint. Imagine the tension when a particularly lavish feast by one family implicitly shamed another, or when a hunter's consistent success was seen as an unfair hoarding of influence. It could easily tip the scales from communal harmony to bitter conflict, sparking disputes over resources, partners, and ultimately, who held the real power around the flickering firelight. The landscape of ancient food sharing, then, wasn't just a simple picture of generosity. It was a dynamic, high-stakes game of social strategy, where every morsel told a story. But as we'll see next, even the most elaborate displays of status and power had their limits, especially when the stakes were truly life and death, and the very structure of the group was challenged. And now, as we pull back the final, most unsettling layer of ancient food sharing, we must confront an uncomfortable truth. While sharing was absolutely essential for survival, it was very rarely an idyllic, harmonious exchange driven purely by goodwill. We've seen how self-interest and genetic imperatives shaped the calculus, how social signaling and reputation played a subtle game. But there's a darker, often overlooked side to this primal economy. A side where the act of sharing morphed from mutual aid into something far more sinister: coercion, control, and the very seeds of social inequality. Not all sharing, you see, was voluntary. Imagine our prehistoric ancestors living on the knife edge of survival. Food was everything. It dictated life or death, strength or weakness. In such an environment, the line between asking for a share and demanding one could be dangerously thin. Sometimes, this coercion was subtle, a whisper of social pressure, a knowing glance that implied consequences for noncompliance, or a chilling understanding of what it meant to be cut off from the group. Other times, it was overtly brutal: the physically stronger individual or the dominant hunting party, simply taking what they wanted, or at the very least, laying claim to the lion's share of a hard-won kill, leaving others with scraps. This wasn't just communal living. It was the fertile ground where early forms of tribute and even outright theft began to sprout, camouflaged under the guise of shared responsibility or the natural order of things. A powerful chieftain, for instance, might not explicitly steal, but his request for the choicest cuts of meat, or the largest portion of gathered grains, would be less a request and more an unchallengeable expectation. Refusal could mean ostracism, a denial of future protection, or even direct violence. Suddenly, the act of giving became less about altruism and more about appeasement, a calculated move to avoid conflict or ensure one's place, however subordinate, within the group. It was a transaction built on fear, not fellowship. Think about the immense power wielded by those who controlled access to vital food sources. The hunter who consistently brought back big game, the shaman who knew the most bountiful foraging spots, the individual with the skills to preserve food for leaner times. These weren't just contributors. They became gatekeepers. Their decisions about who got what and when literally held the power of life and death over their fellow humans. This wasn't just about distributing food. It was fundamentally about controlling people. If your survival depended on someone else's largesse, your autonomy quickly evaporated. You became beholden, loyal, or simply terrified into submission. These proto-hierarchies, forged in the crucible of survival and sustained by the delicate balance of hunger and supply, established patterns of power that would echo through human history. The shares demanded by the powerful evolved into tribute, then taxes, then wages that allowed for control over labor. The initial imbalances, rooted in the very necessity of sharing, became the bedrock of social inequality, creating disparities in wealth, status, and influence that persist to this very day. When you look at the fundamental structures of power in modern society, the control of essential resources remains a constant. It's not always about a hunter and his kill anymore, but the underlying mechanism, control over what people need to survive, remains chillingly similar. So, This complex, often brutal tapestry of self-interest, genetic imperative, social signaling, and yes, even outright coercion, paints a far more accurate, if less romanticized, picture of ancient human food sharing. It strips away the comforting veneer of simple kindness and reveals the intricate, often cutthroat, calculus that truly underpinned our ancestors' interactions. It shows us that even our earliest forms of collective living weren't free of the darker currents of human nature. But what does this deep, sometimes uncomfortable, dive into our ancestors' food economy really tell us about human nature itself? Why do these ancient, raw mechanisms still subtly influence our modern acts of kindness and generosity? Are our charitable donations always purely altruistic? Or are there echoes of social signaling at play? A desire for good reputation? A subconscious seeking of status? When we share our resources today, are we entirely free of the subconscious expectation of reciprocity, or even, in some subtle way, asserting a form of social standing or control? The echoes of the cave, where hunger and survival were paramount, still reverberate in our collective psyche, shaping the very fabric of our interactions in ways we might not even realize. From the brutal necessities of the Stone Age to the complex social contracts that defined early human groups, we've unraveled the real story of ancient food sharing. It was a narrative far more intricate and often less sentimental than the warm, fuzzy kindness we often associate with generosity today. We ventured beyond the simple act of one person giving to another to explore the sophisticated tapestry of motivations that truly drove our ancestors. We've seen how reciprocal altruism laid the crucial groundwork, where a shared kill today promised a life-saving portion tomorrow, creating an essential safety net. This was a calculated gamble, a primal form of insurance in a world where survival was never guaranteed. We delved into the powerful, undeniable force of kin selection, the genetic imperative that compelled individuals to favor their relatives, ensuring the survival of shared genes even at personal cost. And we observed how food became a potent tool for strategic signaling, a grand display of hunting prowess or foraging skill that elevated status, attracted mates, and solidified positions within the intricate social hierarchies of the tribe. But our journey also exposed the darker, more pragmatic undercurrents. We acknowledge the subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, role of coercion and control, where the allocation of vital sustenance could be wielded to assert dominance, maintain order, or even punish dissent. Ancient food sharing, therefore, wasn't just about mere survival. It was a complex negotiation of power, trust, and self-interest, constantly played out against the raw, unforgiving backdrop of the prehistoric world. These aren't just fascinating historical footnotes, intriguing glimpses into a forgotten past. They are the deep-seated evolutionary roots that continue to influence who we are, right here, right now. The primal drivers we've discussed, the drive for reciprocity, the unwavering pull of kinship, the inherent desire for status, and the subtle dance of power, still profoundly shape our generosity, our intricate social structures, and even our modern, often idealized notions of kindness. Think about the unspoken expectations when you offer a favor, the fierce protective instinct you feel for your family, the subtle ways we try to impress others, or the power dynamics within any group. These ancient echoes resonate in every shared meal, every charitable act, every community effort we undertake today. The next time you share a meal, offer a snack, or even just consider helping a stranger, pause for a moment. Consider the millions of years of evolutionary struggle, the complex interplay of survival strategies, and the profound social calculus that shaped that seemingly simple act into a fundamental human behavior. Understanding these primal drivers isn't just about understanding our ancestors, it helps us understand ourselves, our deepest impulses, and the intricate human drama that continues to unfold around us every single day. It reminds us that humanity, in all its astonishing complexity, is built upon foundations laid long before history was ever written, etched into our very DNA. If this journey into the surprising, often brutal, and always profoundly fascinating truths of our ancient past captivated you, if it made you rethink what it truly means to be human, then please give this video a like. Share it with someone who loves a good historical debunking, or anyone curious about the hidden, powerful forces that shaped our species. And most importantly, subscribe to join our tribe as we continue to unearth the incredible, often challenging, but always illuminating stories of what it really meant to be human. Your curiosity fuels our exploration. Thank you for watching.